Hello there, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this series, I share my journey at Microverse as a Microverse student or as a Micronaut. Welcome back after this long break, only from videos because I'm still progressing at Microverse just fine. This video is about weeks 23 till 25. So these are the remaining third, fourth, and fifth weeks of the Rails module. These are the tasks and lessons we did during these weeks. Since what we did in these weeks was very similar, we kept just building Rails project after the other. I decided to make this video a tutorial on building a full Rails project from scratch. This tutorial will make you fly through your capstone project or building any Rails project at this point. Enjoy. Okay, now let's say that we want to create our Rails project following this ER diagram. We have three tables. There is a one-to-many relationship between both the user ingredients and the user and the recipes. And between the ingredients and the recipes, there is a many-to-many relationship. Now, going to our project, the very first thing to do is creating our Rails and finding the best or most efficient comment. And I found it to be actually this one. So Rails new dot, that means it will be in the local directory. We have the postgresql is set from the beginning, and then the -t to skip the test files, since the framework for testing by default is called mini test that we don't really need, since we will use the RSpec testing later. Now, after we created our project, the next step will be generating our files for the entities. Now we can start. I'm gonna use the scaffold. This is the fastest way to create everything for you. So let's do it for the user. Let's do it for the recipe. And let's do it for the ingredients. Now let's see what do we create here. We have the migration file. We have the model. We have the resources or the routes added. We have the controllers and bunch of views files here, all of them automatically created. Now the thing is, we also need another table, since here we have many-to-many relationship. So we will need a join table between the ingredients and the recipes, and there is a comment also for that, so let's add it. So again, Rails generates scaffold recipe ingredient with this reference, and which reference the recipe and the ingredients. Let's take this down. So now we generated all of our tables using the scaffold comment. Now after this, I want to say that using the scaffold, it generates these entities or files in a vacuum without really any relation between them. The latest comment I used, it creates the many-to-many between the ingredients and the recipes in a new table. However, the other relation, the one-to-many between the user and the recipes and the user and the ingredients, are not generated. So let's do this manually. So going to our models, we can see here our ingredient. We will need to add a couple of lines here. So our ingredient, it belongs to the user. It has a one-to-many, and it has many recipe ingredients. This is the join table, and it has also many recipes through our join table. We will do the same thing also for our recipe, but before that, let's see here the join table. The scaffold already sets the association on inside. So going to the recipe now, we will need to do the same thing. It belongs to the user, and it has many ingredients, and it has many of the join table records. Now again, here we have also the user. We need to set the associations for the user, since our user has many recipes and has many ingredients. Now it took us like 5 minutes, and we have all of our tables, all of our entities ready with all of the CRUD functionality. So creating, reading, updating, and deleting, as we will see now. We're gonna test it. So let's test our app. Let's create the database. Let's migrate, and then let's run our server. All right, so refreshing the page, we are having our Rails project ready and working perfectly. Now there is one thing which I did not do, setting up my database.yml. For some reason, I don't need to do that in my MacBook, but I noticed with other partners, and for you, maybe you will need to set up the database, add your username and password to make your app connects to the database. Anyway, so going to the users, we can see our views are already generated by default. We can create a new user. We can call it, for example, Salim, and it will be created. Okay, now going to the recipes again, we can create a new recipe. Let's add, for example, a kabsa. This is a very nice recipe. Okay, so when we try to create that, we have an error because it says user must exist. Now, as I said, the scaffold creates all of these entities in a vacuum without really any associations. So if we want our record recipe to create successfully, we need to attach a user, which is not happening by default. So what we will need to do, we will need to modify our controller by adding the user attribute into the recipe, and then it would work. But now for just testing, I will comment actually that relation. So let's go to our recipe. Here I will comment this line, and also for our ingredients I will comment this line. So now when we add the new recipe, it will add successfully. Let's go to the ingredients, and now the same thing, it will add successfully without any problem. Now if we want to add a record that links a recipe and an ingredient, it's also there by default. So if we went to our recipe ingredients table that we generated using scaffold again, it's there already. So we can click on new, and it gives us by default two inputs, one for the recipe, one for the ingredient. Now the thing here, it checks actually the ID of the recipe and the ID of the ingredient. So if I put the name of my recipe on ingredient, I will have an error, kabsa for example, and the ingredient. It can't see both of them because here it needs the ID, not the name. So far I created one recipe and one ingredient, so that means the ID is 1 for both of them. And creating them, now we have successfully linked the first recipe to our first ingredient. And this is how, like in 5 minutes, just using the scaffold, we can edit, we can update, and also we can destroy, and it will everything would work successfully. Now after this, and before we move to the add device, I want to comment on the routes here. So if we went to our routes file, we can see that it adds the routes like this, like resources. There is no nesting at all. So this is my recommendation. Try not to nest resources if you want to use scaffold, because you will just lose everything. Scaffold won't work if you are nesting resources inside another resources. What you can do, so for example, let's say you want to find the ingredients of a special recipe. So you need to have the recipe and then to find the ingredients. The best way to do this is by setting a custom method inside your recipes, and then inside that custom method you will generate for it a custom route, and then inside that method you will get the ingredients of that specific recipe without messing up with the logic with scaffold. Okay, so this is for here. Now let's try to add our devise. Now, you know, devise is for authentication, and actually devise is one of the new things that we learned in the 3rd week of Rails. I did not talk about before. So the first step to do that is to go to our gem file, and we will need to add the devise. So adding it like this, it's added. Next, of course, let's stop our server, and this is very important step. You need to restart your server before it takes effect. Let's install it. Okay, so now we added devise to our repo. Now we need to add it to our project as well, again using this command. After that, now we added devise to our project, but now we are specifying that we want devise to authenticate our project using the user table or the user entity. So this again is fine, and as you can see, it generated a migration file and it modified our model. So if we went to our model file for the user, it added these 2 lines, actually these 4 lines. So after this step, now devise should be working perfectly. However, if we wanted to customize the views, we can't because it doesn't appear. So if I open views, there is no devise. To make devise appear, we can run this command. So now inside our views, we have devise views. So for example, for the sign up, it will be under registrations new, the sign up, and for the sign in, it will be under sessions new, the login page. Okay, so now let's test our project, and before that we need to migrate. We need to add our new migrations, and now let's run the test, or run the server, I meant. So now going to users/sign in, it works perfectly, and we also have the sign up pages, and we have our device set up correctly. Now, even when we set up device and we went to our recipes page, for example, we are still seeing the information. However, we are adding this authentication to hide this information unless the user is authenticated, isn't it? So to make that work, we can go to our controller. So this one is the recipes view. So going to the recipes controller, let's go here. And in the very beginning, we can add this line, which is before action, authenticate our user. So now we are in the recipes page, and if we refresh the page now, it will take us to the login page since the user is not logged in. So this is the fastest way to generate your project with Rails. And to, well, there are many things missing. There are, you will need to add the test files. You will need to add, for example, confirmation if you wanted to confirm, also using devise. You will need to add your styling, and so these things you can have fun with them, but this thing is actually taking most of the time. You can be done with it in 5 minutes. In conclusion, Rails is a really good framework. I enjoyed working with it. However, I want to point out that scaffold is not recommended to use in your first 2 projects. Try to implement all the files manually, the models, migrations, controllers, and views, etc. I used it only in my capstone, like after I really understand the MVC architecture and these things. I think Microverse really gave us enough number of projects to grasp a good understanding of this framework. Now I'm actually in week 26, which is the first week in the final capstone module. Currently we are working with Rails as only the back end and React for the front end. In general, this module is just 3 weeks. It won't take 5 weeks. We are having a lot of fun there, but I will talk about it in another video. Finally, don't forget the like, subscribe, and notifications bell. If you have any question or feedback, add a comment. Connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter. Have a beautiful day and happy coding.